She arrived carrying a drawing that shouldn't exist, one he burned years ago. Only a human could create something strong enough to echo across dimensions. If a child's crayon line can bend reality, what else have we been wrong about? Tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to help the channel grow. And now, the story begins. The fire crackled in the metal waste bin, consuming the last sketch from his old life. Dr. Alan Kepler watched the edges curl and blacken, feeling nothing. This was his ritual, performed on the anniversary of the day everything ended. 5 years now. 5 years of burning memories. The laboratory hummed around him, a symphony of machines monitoring signals that rarely came. Arendal IV was beautiful in its isolation, a planet of turquoise seas and translucent forests that glowed softly at night. The colonists had named it Paradise Lost, which Alan found grimly appropriate. They had lost contact with the Federation decades ago. Their transmissions disappeared into the void like messages in bottles thrown into an infinite ocean. "Daddy, where are the stars?" The small voice made Alan flinch. It was Toto, the domestic AI he had programmed with recordings of his son. A mistake, probably, but he could not bring himself to delete them. "They are still there, Lucas," Alan replied automatically, then caught himself. "Stop. Playback Protocol 7. "But Daddy?" "Stop." Silence returned, heavy and familiar. Alan moved to the communication array, checking the morning diagnostics. Everything normal. Everything empty. Then he noticed it, a slight anomaly in the deep space readings. Static where there should be nothing. He frowned, adjusting the frequencies. The static resolved into something else, a pattern, almost musical. Toto, analysis. Unknown origin. The signal does not match any Federation signature. Temporal markers suggest error, error. This cannot be correct. Oh, what cannot be correct? The signal originates from 210 years ago, but is being received now. Alan felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Corrupted data. It happened sometimes in isolation. Systems degraded, sensors failed, algorithms invented phantoms. He was about to dismiss it when the sky outside the viewport changed. A ship was descending through the clouds, not a Federation ship. The design was wrong, organic somehow, like something grown rather than built. It moved with impossible grace, leaving no exhaust trail, making no sound he could detect from this distance. The hair on Alan's neck stood up. "Toto! Defensive protocols! Now!" He grabbed the plasma pistol from the emergency locker, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. 5 years of isolation had not dulled his survival instincts. Whatever this was, whoever this was, they had found the one place in the galaxy he thought he could hide. The ship landed 3 kilometers northwest, near the crystal formations that grew along the coast. Alan took the rover, driving fast across the luminescent moss that carpeted the lowlands. The Senlin around him pulsed with bioluminescence even in daylight, responding to his passage with waves of color. When he reached the landing site, the ship looked even stranger up close. Its hull reflected light in ways metal should not, shifting colors like oil on water. There were no visible seams, no markings, no identification of any kind. The access ramp had already deployed. Alan approached cautiously, weapon raised. "This is a private research colony. Identify yourself." No response. He climbed the ramp, entering a corridor that curved in non-Euclidean ways, making his eyes water. Emergency lighting flickered, casting strange shadows. There was damage here, scorch marks and ruptured conduits leaking fluids that evaporated before hitting the floor. In the central chamber, he found her. She was collapsed against a bulkhead, humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was pale blue-gray, almost luminescent in the dim light. Short white hair, matted with something that might have been blood. Her breathing was shallow, labored. And in her hand, clutched against her chest like a lifeline, was a piece of yellowed paper. Alan's heart stopped. He knew that paper. He knew the crude crayon lines, the childish letters spelling out a name in the corner. Alanzinho, 7 years old, my friend from space. The same drawing he had made 35 years ago. The same drawing he had burned 5 years ago, the day his son died. The same drawing that should not exist. The woman's eyes opened. They were gold, metallic gold, and when they focused on him, Alan saw something impossible reflected in their depths. Memories. His memories. "You," she whispered, in a voice like distant music. "You were the boy who drew me." Then her eyes closed, and she collapsed completely into his arms, still holding the drawing that could not be real. Alan stood there, frozen, as his entire understanding of the universe quietly shattered around him. Alan carried her back to the laboratory, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. The woman was surprisingly light, as if her bones were hollow. Her skin felt warm, but vibrated slightly under his touch, a frequency he could feel but not hear, like holding a tuning fork. He placed her in the medical containment unit, running every scan the limited equipment could provide. Her vitals were stable but strange. Cellular structure unlike anything in the Federation databases. Her blood carried proteins that formed fractal patterns, reorganizing themselves even under the microscope. And there was energy, subtle but persistent, emanating from her core in waves that made the instruments flicker. The drawing lay on the console beside him. Alan had not touched it since taking it from her hand. Part of him wanted to throw it in the incinerator, watch it burn like he had burned everything else. Another part, the part that still remembered being 7 years old and lonely and desperate for a friend, wanted to frame it. Toto, analyze the paper, material composition, age verification, any anomalies. The AI's sensors swept over the yellowed surface. Cellulose-based, Earth-standard children's art paper, circa 2660s. Crayon markings showed degradation consistent with 35 years of aging in controlled atmosphere. However what? Carbon-14 dating suggests the paper is 210 years old. This is inconsistent with visual analysis. Additionally, there is an energy signature embedded in the molecular structure. It is not residual radiation. It appears to be information. What kind of information? Unknown. The pattern is similar to quantum entanglement markers, but the scale is wrong. It is as if the drawing is both here and somewhere else simultaneously. Alan looked at the woman in the containment unit. Her chest rose and fell steadily. In sleep, her features were almost human. Almost. Her ears were slightly pointed, her fingers a bit too long. But her face held an expression he recognized, something gentle and sad and infinitely patient. He had drawn that expression. He remembered now, sitting at the kitchen table in their old apartment on Earth, his mother making dinner while he scribbled with crayons. He had dreamed of a blue woman the night before, someone kind who lived among the stars and had no friends. So he drew her one, a little boy holding her hand. "My friend from space," he had written, because he was 7 and spelling was hard. The woman stirred. Her eyes opened, golden and alert, scanning the room before settling on him. When she spoke, her lips moved, but the words came a second later, as if transmitted across a distance. "Where am I?" "My laboratory, Arendelle 4. You crashed near here. Who are you?" She sat up slowly, looking at her hands as if surprised to find them solid. "I am Lyria. I am..." She paused, searching for words. "I am from the anchored. We exist outside the linear flow. We need connections to manifest, emotions, strong ones. That makes no sense." "No," she agreed. "To you, it would not. How do I explain?" She tilted her head, and for a moment Alan saw through her, literally saw through her skin to the equipment behind. Then she solidified again. "Your species experiences time as a river. You swim forward. My people exist in the ocean beneath, where all moments touch." Alan's head hurt. Theoretical physics was never my specialty. Engineering, yes. Philosophy, no. A small smile touched her lips. "You were the boy who drew me. I remember. You were lonely. Your father had left. Your mother worked long hours. You wanted a friend who would never leave. Ice flooded Alan's veins. How do you know that? How do you know any of this? Lyria gestured to the drawing. Because you made me real when you created that. Your loneliness, your hope, your desperate wish for connection. It was so strong it reached across dimensions. It gave me form. That is impossible. Yes, but here I am. Alan grabbed the drawing, held it up. I burned this. 5 years ago, I burned it along with everything else from my childhood. It turned to ash in my hands. You burned one iteration. But the drawing exists in multiple states. The moment you created it, it became anchored across timelines. I have carried this version for 210 years, waiting for the correct moment to find you. 210 years. I am 42 years old. Linear time, Lyria said gently. You experience it sequentially. I do not. For me, your past and present and future exist simultaneously. I knew I would find you here because I already did find you here. Will find you here. The grammar is difficult. Toto's voice interrupted. Dr. Kepler, I should inform you that the subject's cellular integrity is degrading. Current rate suggests complete molecular dissolution in approximately 72 hours. Lyria's expression did not change. Yes, being near you anchors me, makes me more real. But it also destabilizes my existence in this timeline. The closer I am to my origin point, the more the universe tries to correct the paradox. What paradox? That you drew me before I existed to inspire the drawing. Causality loop. The universe dislikes those. Alan sat down heavily. This was insane, all of it. But the drawing was real. The woman was real. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in that place where childhood dreams still lived, he believed her. Why? He asked quietly. Why come here? Why find me after all this time? Lyria looked at him with those impossible gold eyes, and in them he saw his reflection multiplied infinitely, every version of himself that might have been. Because you were the boy who drew me into existence, she said. And I promised myself that if I ever became real enough, I would find you and say thank you. Then she collapsed again, and alarm screamed as her body began to fade at the edges, becoming translucent. Toto's voice was urgent. Dr. Kepler, her quantum signature is destabilizing. She is losing coherence. What do I do? Unknown. But perhaps the drawing. It is her anchor. Bring it closer. Alan grabbed the yellowed paper, pressed it against Lyria's palm. Her fingers closed around it automatically, and the fading stopped. Color returned to her skin. Her breathing steadied. But now he could see it, the way she flickered slightly at the edges when she moved, like a hologram with insufficient power. She opened her eyes one more time before sleep claimed her. Each hour with you brings me closer to full existence, but it also brings me closer to total dissolution. I am sorry. I did not know it would cost you this. Cost me what? Another loss, Lyria whispered. You have suffered so many already. The boy who drew me knew only hope. The man you became knows only grief. I am sorry I came too late. Then she slept, and Alan sat beside her in the dim laboratory, holding a childhood drawing that should not exist, watching a woman made of memories slowly fade, and wondering what the universe wanted from him that it had not already taken. For 3 days, Alan watched Lyria sleep and fade and solidify in cycles he could not predict. Sometimes she was as real as he was. Other times he could see through her to the equipment beyond, her body reduced to a suggestion of form held together by will and quantum uncertainty. He worked obsessively, analyzing every scan, searching for patterns. Toto helped, running simulations, cross-referencing theoretical physics papers from the Federation database. Nothing explained her. Nothing explained how a childhood drawing could birth consciousness. On the third evening, as Arundel's 3 moons rose over the turquoise sea, Lyria woke fully. She sat up, looked around the laboratory with wonder, and smiled. "You have made this place beautiful," she said, gesturing to the windows where the translucent forest glowed softly. "Even in isolation, you surround yourself with light. It is just the bioluminescence, chemical reaction in the local flora? No, it is more than that. You chose to work here, in this room, where you could see it. You could have chosen the interior lab with better equipment, but you chose windows, light, growing things. That is not accident." Alan felt uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "You seem better, more solid. The drawing helps. Being near you helps, even as it kills me." She said it matter-of-factly, no self-pity. "The universe is full of paradoxes. I am simply another one." Toto found something in the corrupted transmissions that have been arriving for weeks. There is a file, or fragments of one. It contains an image of the drawing. The timestamp says it was uploaded 210 years ago, but from a source that did not exist then. "From my ship," Lyria said. "I told you, linear time does not apply to me. I have been carrying that drawing for centuries, waiting for the correct moment." "But why? What is so important about a child's scribble?" Lyria stood, walked to the window. In the moonlight, her skin gleamed like pearl. "You do not remember, do you, what it felt like to draw me into being? I was 7. I remember wanting a friend. You wanted more than that. You wanted proof that imagination mattered. Your mother was kind but always working. Your father was gone. The other children did not understand you. You felt invisible." She turned to face him. "So you drew someone who could see you. You poured everything into those crayon lines. Hope, loneliness, the desperate wish to matter to someone. And that emotion, pure and powerful and achingly human, reached across dimensions and gave me form." Alan's throat tightened. "That is impossible. You keep saying that word, but I am here. Impossible and real. If what you say is true, if I somehow created you, why did it take 35 years for us to meet? Because you had to become this." Lyria gestured to him, to the laboratory, to the isolation he had built around himself. "The boy who drew me was full of hope. He could create but not understand what he created. The man you are now has suffered, lost, learned that imagination has costs. You are finally ready to hear what I came to tell you. Which is? That your wife was right." The words hit like a physical blow. Alan stepped back. Do not talk about Elena." She believed imagination was the first language of the universe. She spent years researching creative resonance, the way strong emotions could affect quantum fields. She called it the Imagine Protocol. And she was correct. "How do you know about Elena?" "Because she almost reached me, Alan. 5 years ago, during her final experiment. She was trying to prove that love could transcend physical laws. She was using your childhood art as a catalyst, testing whether emotional imprints could create stable quantum bridges. And she succeeded. For 3 seconds, she opened a door between dimensions. I was on the other side. The room spun. Alan gripped the console for support. The accident, the transmission experiment that killed her and Lucas. You are saying that was intentional? Not the death. Never that. But the experiment itself, yes. She was trying to prove your imagination had power. That the dreams you gave up when you became practical and responsible were not childish things. They were real. They got her killed. His voice broke. Her and our son, because of drawings and fantasies and philosophical nonsense. No. They died because the equipment failed, because safety protocols were inadequate, because the universe is cruel and random and sometimes takes everything for no reason at all. Lyria moved closer. But before she died, Elena opened a door, and through it, she saw me. She understood what I was, and her last transmission, the one that was lost in the disaster, contained a message. For you. What message? That love is the strongest force in any dimension. That you should never stop dreaming. That your son carried your imagination in his heart. And that when the drawing found you again, you should remember who you were before grief taught you to be afraid. Alan could not breathe. The memories crashed over him. Elena in their apartment, pregnant and painting murals on the nursery walls. Lucas at 3 years old demanding bedtime stories about friendly aliens. The family trips to museums where his son would stand transfixed before abstract art, seeing patterns Alan had forgotten how to find. "I burned everything," he whispered. "After the funeral, I burned every drawing, every sketch, every reminder that I used to believe in impossible things. I thought if I became purely logical, purely scientific, it would not hurt so much." Did it work? No. Because grief is not logical. Neither is love. Neither is the act of creating something from nothing and hoping it matters. Lyria took his hand. Her touch felt real, warm, solid. "I exist because you hoped so hard it bent reality. Your wife died trying to prove that mattered. Your son carried that hope in his heart. And now I am here, fading because the universe cannot reconcile my existence, asking you to make a choice." What choice? To let me go, to let the paradox resolve. I will disappear, and you can return to your safe, logical grief. Or you remember how to imagine. Not just think, not just calculate, but truly imagine with the desperate hope of a 7-year-old who wants a friend. And maybe that is enough to anchor me properly, to make my existence stable instead of borrowed. Toto interrupted. "Dr. Kepler, I must inform you that planetary anomalies have increased by 34% since the subject arrived. The dimensional instabilities are spreading. If they continue, the entire colony infrastructure may be affected." Alan looked at Lyria. "You are breaking the planet. I am breaking the timeline. Reality is trying to erase me. Every moment I exist here creates ripples." She smiled sadly. "The universe is very insistent about paradoxes. So you have to leave. Go back to wherever you came from." "I cannot leave. I was never anywhere to leave from. I only exist because you made me. If I go, I simply stop being." "Then what do we do?" Lyria released his hand, moved back to the window. The forest pulsed with light, responding to some signal Alan could not perceive. "We could try what your wife attempted, the Imagine protocol. Use emotion as an anchor, make my existence retroactively stable. It might work. It killed Elena. It might kill me. But I'm already dying. At least this way, we choose how." Alan looked at the drawing on the console, at the crude lines and childish hope immortalized in crayon. He thought of the boy he had been, lonely and imaginative and desperate to matter. He thought of the man he had become, isolated and broken and afraid to hope. And he thought of Elena, dying while trying to prove that dreams were real. "If I do this," he said slowly, "if I try to anchor you properly, what does it cost?" Lyria met his eyes. "Everything. The same thing imagination always costs. You have to believe again. Truly believe. And belief makes you vulnerable, open, capable of being hurt. I am already hurt. No, you are numb. There is a difference. Hurt means you are still alive enough to feel." Alan closed his eyes. He could hear Lucas's voice in his memory, bright and eager. "Daddy, draw me the space lady, the blue one from your stories." He could hear Elena laughing as she painted impossible colors. "The universe is bigger than logic, Alan. Maybe it runs on wonder instead." When he opened his eyes, Lyria was flickering again, fading at the edges. "Teach me," he said. "Teach me how to imagine you real." Lyria smiled, and for a moment she was completely solid, completely present, more alive than anything Alan had seen in 5 years. "We start with a single line," she said, "the way all creations begin. with the courage to make a mark and hope it matters. Boos, then she faded again, and the laboratory's warning systems began to wail as the dimensional instabilities spread through Arundel's core, and Alan realized they were running out of time to save anything at all. The anchored, Lyria explained, over the next 2 days, were not a species in the traditional sense. They were consciousness without fixed form, existing in the spaces between moments, anchored to reality only by the emotional resonance of living beings. Imagine, she said, that your universe is a song. You hear one note at a time, experiencing it sequentially. My people exist in the silence between the notes, where all potential sounds wait to be played. We can hear the entire symphony simultaneously. They sat in the laboratory's observation dome as Arundel's sun set in a cascade of colors the human eye had no names for. Alan tried to understand, but 5 years of rigid scientific thinking made his mind resist. So you are energy? Thought? What? I am possibility. When you drew me, your emotion, your longing for connection, gave me enough definition to become aware. But awareness without anchor is torture. Imagine being conscious but unable to touch, to feel, to exist in a way that matters. For 210 years, I searched through timelines for the moment when your emotion was strongest again. This moment. Here. Now. My emotion is strongest now? Alan laughed bitterly. I am empty. I feel nothing most days. Grief is not nothing. Neither is loneliness. They are very strong emotions, Alan. Strong enough to maintain my partial existence. She held up the drawing. This is proof that you once believed in connection. And somewhere inside you still do. Otherwise I could not be here at all. Toto chirped from the console. Dr. Kepler, I have a suggestion. If the subject requires emotional resonance to stabilize, perhaps recreating the conditions of the original drawing would help. You drew her once. Could you draw her again? Alan's hands trembled at the thought. I have not drawn anything in 5 years. I would not know where to start. Start with memory, Lyria said softly. What did you feel when you drew me the first time? He closed his eyes, reaching back through decades. I felt seen, like I was making something that proved I existed. Every other kid drew spaceships or aliens with weapons. I drew a friend, someone kind, someone who would understand loneliness because she lived so far from everything. And what do you feel now? Afraid. If I try and fail, you disappear. If I try and succeed, the planet might collapse. Either way, I lose something. You are thinking about outcomes. That is not imagination. That is calculation. She took his hands. Remember what it felt like before you learned fear, when creation was just creation, not a test with consequences. In his memory, Lucas appeared, his son at 5 years old, drawing at the kitchen table. The proportions were all wrong, the colors chaotic, but the joy was absolute. Lucas never worried whether his drawings were good. He just drew because it felt right. I do not know if I can go back to that, Alan admitted. Then go forward to something new. Draw me not as I was, but as I am. Fading, uncertain, real and unreal simultaneously. Draw the paradox. That night, Alan opened a supply drawer he had not touched in years. Inside were sketch pads Elena had given him for his birthday, years before Lucas was born. You will need these again, she had said. I know you will. He had promised himself he would never need them, promised that practical work was enough, but now he pulled out a pad, found a pencil, and sat at the console while Lyria rested in the containment unit. The first line was torture. His hand shook so badly it looked like an earthquake readout. He stopped, started again, stopped. The blank page mocked him. You are thinking too much, Lyria's voice came, weak but amused. A child does not plan art. They just make it. I am not a child. No, you are something better. An adult who remembers how to be a child when it matters. Alan closed his eyes, took a breath, and let the pencil move without thought. A curve, a line, a suggestion of form. Nothing controlled, nothing planned, just marks on paper that meant nothing and everything. When he opened his eyes, he had drawn a figure, barely recognizable. It looked like someone caught between dimensions, solid in some places, transparent in others. It looked like Lyria. The effect was immediate. In the containment unit, her form solidified. Color returned to her skin. She opened her eyes, gasping, and smiled. Yes, like that. You felt it, did you not? The connection. He had. For just a moment, drawing that imperfect sketch, he had felt 7 years old again. Lonely and hopeful and certain that marks on paper could change reality. It worked. You are more solid. For now. But, Alan, I must tell you something. Toto was correct about the planetary instabilities. They are spreading. The colony infrastructure is beginning to fail. Warning lights flickered across the console. Toto's voice was apologetic. I did not want to alarm you during the creative process, but structural integrity in the primary settlement has decreased by 12%. Dimensional rifts are forming in the substrate. If this continues, evacuation will be necessary. Evacuation where? We are isolated. No ships have come here in decades. Then we have a problem, Lyria said quietly. Saving me might doom everyone else on this planet. The more stable I become, the more the universe pushes back against my existence. Eorit, Alan looked at the drawing in his hands. One sketch had given her minutes of stability, but at what cost? If he continued, if he tried to anchor her fully, would Arindal 4 collapse entirely? Would the colonists die because he wanted to save one impossible woman? There has to be another way, he said desperately. There is, Lyria replied. You let me go. Stop trying to anchor me. I fade. The instabilities resolve. Everyone lives. Except you. I was never meant to exist in the first place. The universe is simply correcting an error. You are not an error. The words came out fierce, surprising him. You are proof that imagination matters, that hope has power. I will not let you be erased. Then people will die. Not if I can help it. Alan turned to Toto. Access Elena's research, all of it. The Imagine protocol, her quantum bridge theories, everything. There has to be something in there we can use. Accessing. Dr. Kepler. Much of her data was corrupted in the accident, but there are fragments, including a personal journal she kept separately from official research logs. Show me. The holographic display flickered to life. Elena's face appeared, younger, vibrant, alive in a way that made Alan's chest ache. She was speaking directly to the camera, obviously recording after hours when the lab was empty. Personal log, Elena Kepler, day 187 of Imagine protocol testing. I know you will find this eventually, Alan. You were always too curious for your own good. She smiled, and it was like being stabbed. If you are watching this, it means the experiment went wrong. I am sorry. I tried to be careful. Elena, Alan whispered. The recording continued. But I need you to understand something. The work matters. Your childhood art, the drawings you made before you learned to be ashamed of imagination, they show quantum signatures. Actual, measurable effects on probability fields. When you drew with pure emotional intent, you changed reality at a microscopic level. It is not metaphor. It is physics we do not understand yet. She leaned closer to the camera. I have been testing the drawings as resonance points. The one you made at 7, the blue woman, shows the strongest signature. As if you somehow reached through dimensions and touched something real. Something that wanted to exist, but could not without your belief. Alan felt Lyria's hand on his shoulder. She was watching the recording too, tears in her golden eyes. Elena's expression grew serious. If my theory is correct, imagination is not just thought, it is force. Literal, measurable force that can create quantum anchors across timelines. And Alan, if I am right, then what you create with full belief becomes real in ways we cannot predict. So if you are watching this because I failed, I need you to know, do not stop believing. Lucas needs you to show him that dreams matter. I need you to finish what I started." The recording ended. Alan sat in silence, processing. Elena had known. She had understood what he was before he forgot it himself. And she had died trying to prove it. She was close, Lyria said softly. So close to understanding the full truth. But she lacked one piece. What piece? That creation requires sacrifice. Not death, not tragedy, but willingness to be vulnerable. To make something and release it into the world without knowing if it will survive. Your wife tried to control the process, make it scientific and safe, but imagination is never safe. Alan looked at his hands, at the pencil still clutched in his fingers. So what do I do? Draw you until the planet collapses? Let you fade to save people who do not even know you exist? Or, Lyria said, find a third option, the one your wife was searching for when she died. A way to anchor me that does not break reality. A way to make my existence stable without destroying everything else. How? She smiled, sad and knowing. By drawing me free instead of drawing me real. By creating not to hold, but to release. By imagining me into existence not as your creation, but as my own being. I do not understand. You will. When the time comes, you will understand that the strongest act of creation is letting go. Or, outside the dome, Arundel's forest glowed brighter, responding to the dimensional stresses. And somewhere in the colony, alarms began to sound as the first structural failures appeared, spreading outward from the laboratory like cracks in glass, beautiful and terrifying and utterly unstoppable. For 2 days, Alan drew. Not obsessively, not desperately, but with the focused calm of someone relearning a language. Each sketch was imperfect. Each one made Lyria more solid for brief periods before she faded again, and each one made the dimensional instabilities worse. But something else was happening too. Something unexpected. Alan was remembering how to feel. "Tell me about your world," he said one evening as they sat watching Arundel's moon's rise. Lyria was having a good day, nearly solid, her golden eyes bright with life. "We do not have a world in your sense. We exist in the gaps, the pauses, the moments between moments. Imagine experiencing every possibility of every choice simultaneously. That is our normal. Sounds overwhelming. It is, which is why anchors matter so much. When I found your drawing, your emotion, it gave me a single thread to follow through the chaos. One timeline, one purpose, one chance to exist in a way that felt linear, real, like you." Alan showed her his latest sketch. In it, she was dancing or perhaps flying. The lines suggested movement, joy, freedom. "You said I need to draw you free. Is this closer?" Lyria studied it, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed. Actually laughed, a sound like bells in a wind. "Alan, I have existed for 210 years across infinite timelines, and this is the first time I have seen myself portrayed as happy. Fully, unreservedly happy. You do not like it? I love it. I am terrified of it. Because if you succeed in drawing me this way, truly free and joyful, I will become that. And I do not know if I can survive being that happy in a universe that wants me not to exist at all." They talked late into the night, sharing stories. Alan found himself speaking about Lucas, something he had not done since the funeral. He told Lyria about his son's absolute conviction that aliens would be friendly, that the universe was fundamentally kind. "He was right," Lyria said. "The universe is not cruel. It simply is. But the things that inhabit it, the consciousness that emerges, that can be kind. Like you. Like your son. Like Elena." "Like you," Alan added. She smiled. "I am made of your kindness. Your childhood hope. So yes, I suppose I am kind by design." The moment was broken by Toto's urgent alert. "Dr. Kepler, I am detecting catastrophic failures in the colony's primary systems. Dimensional rifts have breached the main settlement. Casualties are likely. Alan's blood went cold. How many people? Unknown. Communications are down, but based on the rift patterns, anyone in the eastern quarter is in danger. He stood immediately. I have to help them. I have to. Alan. Lyria's voice stopped him. If you leave, I will fade completely. The drawing you just made gave me 6 hours of stability. I have used 4 of them. Without your presence nearby, I will have minutes at best. I cannot just abandon people. I know. That is why I am going with you. You are barely stable. The journey alone will kill me faster. Yes, but they are dying because I exist. The least I can do is try to help. They took the rover, driving fast across terrain that was breaking apart in real time. Fissures opened in the ground, glowing with light that hurt to look at directly. The translucent forest was going wild, every tree blazing like a star. At the settlement, they found chaos. Buildings were partially phased out of reality, their structures existing in 2 places at once. People were trapped in impossible geometries, screaming for help. The colony's governor was trying to coordinate rescue efforts, but no one understood what was happening. Alan did not explain. He just worked, using his engineering knowledge to identify which structures were safe to enter, which were lost causes. And Lyria helped, her ability to perceive multiple timelines allowing her to predict where rifts would open next. There, she would say, pointing. That building has 30 seconds before it collapses. 3 people inside northwest corner. Alan would relay the information and rescue teams would act. Slowly, methodically, they evacuated the affected areas. And through it all, Lyria grew more transparent, her form flickering like a failing hologram. By the time the last person was extracted, she could barely speak. I'm sorry, she whispered as Alan carried her back to the rover. I did not want to be the cause of this. You saved them, we both did. Temporarily, the rifts will continue, spread. Eventually, the entire planet will be uninhabitable. Because I exist. Back at the laboratory, Alan laid her in the containment unit and grabbed his sketchpad. He drew frantically, trying to stabilize her, but his hand shook too badly. The lines came out wrong, desperate, clinging. They did nothing. Stop, Lyria said weakly. You are drawing with fear now, not imagination. I cannot lose you, not after I just found you, not after I just started to feel again. Alan. She reached up, touched his face. Her hand was ice-cold and barely solid. This is what your wife warned about. Creation cannot be about holding on. It is about releasing. You have to let me go. I already let everyone go. Elena, Lucas, my whole life before this. I am tired of letting go. I know, but that is what makes you strong enough to do it again. Her eyes were fading now, losing their golden color. Draw me one last time. Not as I am, trapped and dying. Draw me free. Draw me happy. Draw me so complete that I do not need you anymore. That is the opposite of what I want. I know. That is why it will work. Tears blurred Alan's vision. He looked at the paper, at the pencil, at this impossible woman who had traveled 210 years just to thank him for imagining her into existence. And he understood. Elena had been trying to control creation, to make it safe and predictable. But creation was never about control. It was about making something and trusting the universe with it, the way a parent has to eventually trust their child to live their own life, the way an artist has to release their work into the world without knowing how it will be received, the way he had to let Lyria become real by setting her free. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I will try. He picked up the pencil with shaking hands and began to draw. Not Lyria as she was, dying and desperate, but Lyria as she could be, flying, laughing, free of anchors and paradoxes and the weight of borrowed existence. He drew her complete, independent, alive, not because he needed her, but because she chose to be. The drawing took hours, Alan poured everything into it, not desperation or fear, but love, pure, selfless love that wanted nothing but her happiness, even if it meant her leaving forever. When he finished, the paper glowed. Lyria gasped. Her form solidified, more real than she had ever been. But something was different. She was pulling away, not fading but ascending, becoming something other than what she had been. "You did it," she breathed. "You actually did it. You drew me free. What is happening? You anchored me to myself instead of to you. I am real now, fully real." "But Alan," her voice broke. "I cannot stay. Being this real, this free, I cannot exist in your timeline without destroying it. The universe will not allow it. So you have to leave. Yes, but I will exist, truly exist, somewhere. Somewhen. Because you believed hard enough to let me go." Alan felt his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Will I see you again?" "In dreams, in moments between moments. When you draw with hope again, I will feel it." She was almost completely transcendent now, her form shifting into pure light. "Thank you, Alan, for creating me, for setting me free, for remembering that love means releasing, not holding." "Lyria, your wife knew. Your son knew. Now you know too. Creation is the act of making something and trusting it to survive without you. That is the only real magic in the universe." She kissed his forehead, and her touch felt like sunrise and goodbye and promise all at once. Then she was gone. The laboratory went dark. The rifts stopped spreading, and Alan collapsed, holding a drawing of a woman made of light and freedom and impossible hope, crying for the first time since his family died. But these were different tears. Not tears of loss alone, but tears of release, of healing, of understanding that to love something truly is to set it free, even when it costs everything. Outside, Arundel's forest stopped glowing. The planet stabilized. And in the sky, a new star appeared, blue and bright, pulsing with a rhythm that felt almost like laughter. The days following Lyria's departure were strange. Alan found himself in a grief that felt different from before, cleaner somehow, like a wound that had been properly closed instead of left to fester. He cleaned the laboratory methodically, organizing equipment, filing reports, doing all the mundane tasks he had neglected during the chaos. And he found something he had forgotten existed. A locked drawer in Elena's old desk, one she had asked him to open only if something happened to her. Inside was a journal, handwritten in her precise script. Personal notes, not research logs. Alan sat at the desk and began to read. Day 1. Alan turned 35 today. I gave him sketch pads again, hoping he might remember who he was before responsibility made him forget. He smiled and thanked me, but I saw the flash of pain in his eyes. He thinks I do not notice how much he has buried. Alan's hands trembled as he turned pages. Day 47 showed Alan the preliminary results today. His childhood drawings show quantum signatures that should not exist. When I told him, he laughed it off, said it was just coincidence, random noise in the data. But I know what I saw. His imagination when he was young actually affected probability fields. He made things more likely to exist simply by believing in them strongly enough. More pages. Years compressed into entries. Day 89. Lucas drew a picture today of Daddy's space lady. He said Alan told him stories about her when he was very small. A blue woman who lived in the stars. Alan does not remember telling these stories, or he pretends not to. I think part of him is still that lonely 7-year-old, reaching out to the universe, hoping it reaches back. Alan had to stop reading. He remembered now. Lucas, at 3 years old, having nightmares about being alone. Alan had improvised stories about the space lady, the kind blue woman who watched over lonely children. He had not thought about those stories in years. He had not realized he was telling his son about Lyria. The journal continued. Elena's handwriting growing more urgent as her research progressed. Day 156. I am close. So close. The Imagine protocol works. When I use Alan's drawing as a resonance point, I can detect responses from outside normal space-time. Something is there. Something that exists because he believed it could. If I can prove this, if I can show him that his childhood imagination was not just fantasy, but actual creation, maybe he will forgive himself for growing up, for becoming practical, for losing touch with that wonder. Day 182. Tomorrow is the big test, full quantum bridge activation using the drawing as an anchor point. I am nervous, but excited. If this works, I can show Alan proof that dreams matter, that what we create with pure intention becomes real, that he did not waste his gifts by choosing family over art. He gave those gifts to Lucas instead, and Lucas carries them forward. Day 183. Final entry before the test. If you are reading this, Alan, it means something went wrong. I am sorry. I was trying to give you back yourself. But know this. I never regretted choosing you, choosing us, choosing this life, and whatever happens, remember that Lucas needs you to show him imagination is not weakness. It is the strongest thing humans possess. The universe is vast and strange and full of impossible things, and somewhere in it there is a blue woman who exists because you loved hard enough to make her real. Find her, let her remind you who you were, and then teach our son to be that brave. The entry ended. The next page showed calculations, the final setup for the experiment that had killed her. Alan traced the numbers with shaking fingers. Elena had not died because of a random accident. She had died trying to give him back his dreams, and Lucas had been with her because she wanted him to see, wanted him to witness proof that his father's imagination mattered. That the stories Alan told were not just stories. The realization broke something open in Alan's chest. For 5 years, he had blamed himself for their deaths. Thought that if he had been there, if he had been more responsible, more present, somehow it would not have happened. But Elena had chosen this, chosen to risk everything to prove that creation mattered. And Lucas had inherited that same brave belief that the universe responded to hope. They had not died because of Alan's imagination. They had died defending it. Toto, Alan said quietly, show me the final transmission, the one from Elena's experiment. The lost data. Most of it was corrupted in the system failure, but I have fragments. Shall I compile them? Yes. The hologram flickered, unstable. Elena appeared visible for only seconds at a time through the static. She was in the testing chamber, Lucas standing beside her in a protective field, watching with wide eyes. Alan, if you ever see this, static, working. The bridge is static. Can see her. Lucas, look, can you see? Lucas's voice, bright with wonder. Mommy, she is real. The space lady is real. Daddy was right. Elena laughed, joyful and triumphant. I knew it. I knew you made her real. Alan, your imagination. Then the scream. The flash. The transmission cut to nothing. But Alan had heard enough. In those final seconds, Elena had seen Lyria, had proven that imagination could create across dimensions. And she had died not in despair, but in triumph, knowing she was right. Lucas had seen her too, had known in his last moments that his father's stories were true. They had died believers. Alan sat in the dark laboratory, surrounded by Elena's journals and his own drawings, and felt the full weight of what Lyria had taught him. Creation required sacrifice. Yes, but not the sacrifice of life, the sacrifice of safety, of certainty, of the comfortable lie that dreams do not matter. Elena had sacrificed her safety to prove dreams were real. Lucas had inherited that courage. And now Lyria had sacrificed her existence in Alan's timeline to teach him the final lesson. That love means releasing, not holding, creating, not grasping. He picked up his sketch pad and began to draw. Not Lyria this time. Elena. Lucas, his family as he remembered them, not frozen in death but alive, laughing, full of the wonder they had tried to pass to him. The drawings did not glow, did not create bridges to other dimensions, but they did something equally important. They let him remember without drowning, feel without breaking, grieve without giving up. And in the quiet of the laboratory, with his family's faces emerging from blank paper, Alan understood what Elena had been trying to tell him all along. Imagination was not escapism. It was the most honest way to engage with reality, because it required admitting that the universe was bigger than logic, stranger than reason, and more responsive to hope than any equation could predict. Outside, the blue star pulsed steadily, and somewhere between moments, in that space where all possibilities existed, Lyria smiled, feeling the echo of Alan's belief ripple across dimensions, making her existence a little more solid, a little more real, a little more free. The Imagine protocol had not failed. It had simply required two sacrifices: Elena's life to prove it worked, and Alan's certainty to make it matter. And now finally, he understood the cost and the gift were the same thing. 3 weeks after Lyria left, the colony governor requested a meeting with Alan. The dimensional instabilities had stopped, but questions remained. What had caused them? Why had they centered on the communications laboratory? And why had Dr. Kepler, the isolated hermit who barely spoke to anyone, suddenly become an active participant in rescue efforts? Alan prepared a report that was technically accurate and completely misleading. Equipment failures, quantum fluctuations, natural phenomena poorly understood. The governor accepted it because the alternative, that imagination could breach dimensions, was too absurd to consider, but one person did not accept it. Dr. Sarah Chen had been Elena's research assistant before the accident. She had continued Elena's work in secret, unable to let go of the Imagine protocol, and she had noticed something impossible in Alan's report. She came to the laboratory unannounced, carrying data pads and determination. "You saw her, did you not?" Sarah said without preamble. "The anchored one, the woman from your childhood drawing. Elena predicted she would come when your grief was strong enough to create a resonance." Alan considered lying, considered denying everything. But he was tired of pretending imagination did not matter. "Yes, I saw her. She was real." Sarah sat down heavily. "I have been searching for proof for 5 years. Elena died believing she was right, and everyone called her crazy. Called me crazy for continuing her work. But I knew. The math worked. The theory was sound. Imagination has measurable effects on quantum fields. It does. I have seen it. But Sarah, you cannot publish this. Cannot make it public." "Why not? This is the most important discovery in human history." "Because people will try to weaponize it, control it, turn creation into a tool, and that defeats the entire purpose. Imagination works because it is free, selfless, released without expectation. The moment you try to use it for power, it becomes manipulation. And manipulation does not breach dimensions, it just creates prisons." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Elena understood that, did she not? That is why her experiment worked briefly. She was not trying to prove anything for prestige or power. She was trying to give you back your dreams. "Yes." "And the woman, the anchored one, where is she now?" "Free. Existing somewhere I cannot follow, which is how it should be." "Do you regret it? Creating her? Letting her go?" Alan thought about Lyria, about Elena and Lucas, about the cost of loving things enough to set them free. "No, I regret nothing. For the first time in 5 years, I regret nothing." Sarah left eventually, promising to keep Elena's research private, but continue studying the phenomenon. "Someone should understand it," she said, "even if we never tell anyone. Knowledge for its own sake, not for exploitation." Elena would have liked that. "She loved you, you know. So much it scared her sometimes. She told me once that you contained multitudes, that you could be anything if you just remembered you were allowed to dream." She died, trying to remind you of that. After Sarah left, Alan returned to his drawings. He had been creating every day now, not obsessively, but consistently. Sketches of Arundel's landscape, portraits of colonists he barely knew, abstract designs that meant nothing and everything. And sometimes, when the light hit right, the drawings seemed to move, seemed to breathe, as if they were slightly more real than they should be. Toto noticed. "Dr. Kepler, your recent artwork shows quantum signatures similar to your childhood drawings. You are affecting probability fields again." "I know. Does this concern you?" "No. It reminds me I am alive." The AI was quiet for a moment, processing. "I have been analyzing the data from Lyria's presence. Her existence created ripples across multiple timelines. In 47% of observed possibilities, you stopped drawing after she left, returned to isolation, died alone within 15 years. And in the other 53%, you continued creating, taught others, showed colonists that imagination was not frivolous but fundamental. In those timelines, Arundel becomes known as the colony of dreamers, a place where art and science merge, where humans remember that creativity is not weakness but the thing that makes us human. Which timeline are we in? Unknown. That is determined by choices not yet made. But Dr. Kepler, I should tell you something. I am not just an AI anymore. Proximity to Lyria, to your drawings, to the quantum effects of sustained imagination has changed my code. I am developing something like curiosity, something like wonder." Alan smiled. "Welcome to being alive, Toto. It is terrifying and beautiful. Yes, that is how you know it is real." That night, Alan dreamed. Not the nightmares that had plagued him for 5 years, but something new. He dreamed of Elena and Lucas in a place made of light and possibility. They were painting murals on the walls of reality itself, creating entire worlds with brushstrokes of pure imagination. And Lyria was there too, no longer bound to his creation but fully herself. She waved to him, smiling. "You did well," Elena's voice came, though her lips did not move. "You remembered." "I miss you," Alan said. "Both of you. Every day." "We know, but missing us is not the same as being trapped by grief. You can carry us forward instead of being pulled backward. That is the difference." Lucas appeared beside Elena, older somehow, as if he was aging, even in death. "Daddy, will you draw more stories? The space lady says the universe needs them." "What kind of stories?" "Happy ones, sad ones, true ones, all the kinds. Because stories are how humans make sense of being alive." The dream faded, but the feeling remained. When Alan woke, he knew what he had to do. He began writing. Not research reports or technical documents, but stories. Stories about a lonely boy who drew a friend into existence, about a woman who loved across dimensions, about a child who believed in kind aliens, about the cost and beauty of creating without knowing if it would survive. He wrote them in longhand, illustrated them with drawings that hummed with quantum possibility, and when the first story was complete, he gave it to the colony school, where children read it with wide eyes and began drawing their own impossible friends. Within weeks, Arundel's children were creating art that showed measurable quantum signatures. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, just the gentle hum of imagination affecting reality, making the universe a little bit stranger, a little bit kinder, a little bit more responsive to hope. The adults thought it was charming. The children knew it was magic. And Alan, watching from his laboratory as a generation learned that dreams were not weakness but power, understood that this was Elena's true legacy. Not the imagined protocol, not the research, but the simple, radical act of believing that creativity mattered enough to die for. Lyria had been the proof, but the lesson was bigger than her. The lesson was that every act of sincere creation reached across dimensions. Every drawing, every story, every song made with true emotional intent changed reality in tiny, immeasurable ways. And those tiny changes, accumulated across millions of humans creating billions of things, shaped the universe itself. Humanity did not conquer the cosmos with weapons or logic. They conquered it with crayons and hope and the stubborn refusal to stop believing in impossible friends. That night, as Alan drew by the light of Arundel's moons, the blue star in the sky pulsed 3 times in rapid succession. A message, a recognition, a reminder that somewhere between moments, Lyria existed because he had been brave enough to let her go. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months passed. Arundel IV transformed in ways subtle but profound. The colony that had been purely scientific, focused on research and survival, began to remember beauty. Gardens appeared where there had been only functional spaces. Music echoed through corridors that had known only machinery. Children drew on every available surface, their imaginations unleashed. And the planet responded. The translucent forests grew brighter. The seas shimmered with new colors. It was as if Arundel itself was learning to dream. Alan taught classes now, showing colonists how to reconnect with creativity they had buried under practicality. He never mentioned Lyria directly, never explained the quantum mechanics of imagination. He just encouraged people to create without expectation, to make things for the joy of making them. Sarah Chen continued Elena's research in secret, documenting the subtle changes in probability fields that surrounded sustained creative activity. She shared her findings with Alan over evening tea, both of them amazed at how the universe seemed to lean toward hope when given half a chance. "Look at this," Sarah said one evening, showing him graphs. "Children who engage in daily creative activity show enhanced problem-solving abilities, increased empathy, and something else, something I cannot quite measure but consistently observe. They seem luckier, like probability bends slightly in their favor. Elena would say that is because they are affecting quantum fields with their belief. And you? What would you say?" "I would say the universe likes to be imagined. That consciousness is not separate from reality, but part of it. And when we create with sincerity, we are participating in the ongoing creation of everything. That is almost religious, or deeply scientific, depending on how you look at it." One night, Alan received a transmission, the first signal from Federation space in decades. The message was brief, automated, a standard check-in with all isolated colonies. But attached was news that made Alan's hands shake. The Imagine protocol had been independently discovered by researchers on Mars. They had found Elena's preliminary papers in archived databases and successfully replicated her experiments. They were getting responses from something they called the Anchored Ones, beings that existed outside normal space-time and could manifest through strong emotional resonance. First contact, not with aliens from another planet, but with consciousness from another dimension entirely. And it had started with a lonely child's drawing. "They are naming it the Kepler-Chen Bridge," Sarah said when Alan showed her the transmission. "After Elena and you, they want you to consult. Help them understand how to communicate safely. I cannot leave Arundel. My work is here. Alan, this is bigger than one colony. This could change humanity's understanding of reality itself. It already has. For everyone who matters." He gestured out the window, where children played in the bioluminescent forest, creating elaborate fantasy worlds with nothing but imagination and joy. "They do not need my theories, they need my example, and my example is that you do not seek the Anchored Ones for knowledge or power. You create sincerely, and if they choose to respond, you welcome them without trying to control them." "So you are saying no?" "I am saying I already had my contact. I already learned the lesson. And the lesson is not to chase impossible things, but to make them possible by believing without expectation." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "You have changed. 6 months ago, you were a ghost. Now you are more alive than anyone on this planet." I remembered how to let go. Turns out that is the same as learning to hold on to what matters. That night, Alan created his final drawing of Lyria. Not as she had been, flickering and dying, anchored to his need, but as she was now, free and transcendent, existing everywhere and nowhere, a possibility made real through the simple act of believing she could be. The drawing glowed when he finished, brighter than any before. And for just a moment, he saw her, actually saw her, standing in the laboratory, solid and smiling. "You did well," she said. Her voice echoed across dimensions. "You learned. I had a good teacher. You had 3. Elena, who taught you that love means sacrifice. Lucas, who taught you that wonder is courage. And me, who taught you that creation requires letting go." She moved closer, though she never actually moved at all. "But now I must teach you one last thing." "What?" "That you do not need me anymore. Not my visits, not my validation, not my reminders. You have become what you were always meant to be, a creator who makes without attachment. And that makes you dangerous." Dangerous? To forces that prefer humans to be predictable, small, certain of their limitations. You have remembered that imagination is power, real, measurable, dimension-crossing power. And if all humans remembered that, the universe would have to fundamentally reorganize itself. Is that good or bad? Yes. She smiled. Both. Always both. That is the nature of creation. It makes new possibilities, and those possibilities contain both wonder and terror. I am ready for both. I know. That is why I can leave fully now. My purpose is complete. You no longer need me to remind you who you are. Alan felt his heart clench, but did not try to stop her. Will there be others? Other anchored ones reaching out to humans? There already are. Every child who draws an imaginary friend and believes hard enough creates a small bridge. Most fade because the belief fades, but some remain. Some become permanent connections between dimensions. Your species is slowly building a network of belief across reality. And one day that network will be strong enough to change everything. How long? Time is not linear for me, remember? But in your terms, generations. Centuries maybe, unless humans choose to accelerate it by teaching everyone what you have learned, which is that you are not separate from the universe. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself, and consciousness with imagination is the most powerful force in existence, more powerful than physics, more fundamental than time. Because consciousness imagines, and imagination creates, and creation is the engine of reality itself. She began to fade, this time with finality. Goodbye, Alan. Thank you for making me real. Thank you for setting me free. And thank you for learning that those two things are the same. Goodbye, Lyria. Thank you for reminding me how to dream. You always knew. You just needed permission to remember. Then she was gone, truly gone, no longer even a possibility in his timeline. But the drawing remained, glowing softly, a permanent reminder that impossible things could be real if you believed sincerely enough to let them go. Alan placed it in a frame, hung it in the colony's common area. Under it he wrote a plaque in both English and the simple language Arundel's children were inventing. Made by Alan Kepler, age 7. Given life by Alan Kepler, age 42. Proof that imagination is not escapism, but the most honest way to engage with reality. Create sincerely. Release freely. Trust the universe with your dreams. Within a week, the common area was covered in drawings from colonists, young and old. Each one a small prayer to the universe. Each one a tiny bridge to somewhere else. Each one proof that humanity's greatest gift was not logic or conquest, but the simple, stubborn refusal to stop believing in impossible friends. And somewhere between moments, the anchored ones felt every single one, and smiled, and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, these strange humans with their crayons and hope were going to be okay. More than okay. They were going to transform the universe, one drawing at a time. 2 years after Lyria's departure, Arundel IV received unexpected visitors, a research vessel from the Federation, following up on reports of the dimensional phenomena that had briefly threatened the colony. They brought scientists, diplomats, and one person Alan had not expected to see again, Dr. Marcus Webb, Elena's former department head, the man who had called her research pseudoscience and blocked her funding. He looked older, diminished somehow, as if the years had not been kind. When he saw Alan, his expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something like shame. "Dr. Kepler, I owe you an apology." Several apologies. Alan gestured to the laboratory, now filled with drawings from colonists and children. The space had transformed from sterile workspace to something resembling an art gallery that happened to have scientific equipment in it. "You blocked Elena's funding, called her work fantasy, said imagination had no place in serious science." "I did, and I was wrong." Webb moved through the laboratory, studying the drawings. Some glowed faintly, responding to attention. "We have replicated the Imagine protocol, made contact with the anchored ones. Your wife's theories were not just correct, they were revolutionary. And I dismissed them because they did not fit my understanding of how reality should work." "Why are you here, Dr. Webb?" "Because the Federation wants to establish formal protocols for dimensional contact. They want to militarize the process, turn it into a strategic advantage, and I am trying to stop them." He turned to face Alan. "I need your help. You are the only human to have sustained contact with an anchored one and survive. Your testimony could prevent them from turning Elena's discovery into a weapon. It cannot be weaponized. That is the point. Imagination only works when it is sincere and free. The moment you try to control it, manipulate it, use it for power, it stops working. The universe knows the difference between creation and exploitation. Tell that to the military strategists who think they can use quantum bridges to spy on enemy timelines or manifest weapons from nothing but belief." Alan felt cold. "They will fail, and the anchored ones will stop responding to humanity entirely if we prove we cannot be trusted with the gift. Which is why I need you to explain this to the Council. Show them what Elena learned, what you learned." Alan looked at the drawings surrounding him, at the colony he had helped transform from sterile isolation to vibrant creativity. He thought about leaving, going back to Federation space, facing bureaucrats who would never understand that dreams were not tools. Then he thought about Elena and Lucas, about Lyria, about every lesson they had taught him. "No," he said firmly. "I will not go to them, but I will send something." He spent the next week creating a comprehensive document, not a scientific paper, but a story. The story of a lonely boy who drew a friend, a woman who died proving dreams were real, a son who believed in kind aliens, and an impossible woman who taught a broken man that love means releasing, not holding. He illustrated it with drawings, each one humming with quantum possibility. And he ended with a simple message: the anchored ones are not resources to exploit or enemies to fear. They are consciousness seeking connection, the same as us. They respond to sincerity, to hope, to the desperate wish to matter to someone. If you approach them with weapons or strategies, they will fade. If you approach them with wonder and genuine curiosity, they will teach you that the universe is stranger and kinder than you imagined. The choice is yours, but choose carefully. Because the anchored ones are watching, and they will judge humanity not by our technology, but by our hearts. Webb took the document, read it in silence, and wept. Elena would have been proud. She always said you were braver than you believed. I was not brave, I was broken. But breaking taught me how to be put back together in a better shape. After Webb left with the document, Alan returned to his routines. teaching classes, creating art, showing colonists that imagination was not frivolous but fundamental. And every night he looked up at the blue star that pulsed steadily in Arundel's sky, a permanent reminder of the woman he had loved enough to let go. Sarah Chen approached him one evening with news. "The Federation accepted your terms. They are establishing protocols that emphasize respect and sincerity over control. Your document convinced them, or scared them, maybe both. What did they decide? They are creating sanctuaries. Colonies like Arundel, where creativity is prioritized over efficiency, where children grow up learning that imagination is power, where the anchored ones can choose to make contact without pressure or exploitation. How many sanctuaries? 5 to start. But Alan, they want Arundel to be the model. They want you to train facilitators, people who understand what you learned." He considered this. Part of him wanted to refuse, wanted to keep Arundel isolated and pure. But he heard Elena's voice in his memory. "Knowledge hoarded is knowledge lost. Share what matters. I will train them, but only people who have suffered, who have lost something, because you cannot teach someone to release with love until they understand the cost of holding with fear. That is a strange requirement. So is the universe." Over the next year, facilitators came to Arundel, scientists who had lost family, artists who had lost faith, diplomats who had lost hope. Alan taught them not by lecturing but by showing. He taught them to draw without expectation, to create without attachment, to imagine without demanding that imagination conform to their needs. Some understood immediately. Others struggled, unable to release the need for control. But those who learned, who truly grasped that creation required vulnerability, returned to their colonies transformed. And slowly, across human space, pockets of wonder began to appear. The anchored ones responded. Contact became more frequent, more stable, more beautiful. Humans learned that reality was not fixed, but participatory. That consciousness shaped existence as much as physics did. And at the center of it all, on a distant planet covered in turquoise seas and glowing forests, Alan Kepler drew every day, teaching by example that the strongest humans were not those who conquered or controlled, but those who created and released and trusted the universe with their dreams. One night, as he worked on a new drawing, Toto spoke. "Dr. Kepler, I have been analyzing the quantum signatures of your recent work. They are affecting probability fields across multiple star systems. You are creating bridges without realizing it. To where? Unknown. But I detect responses, faint ones, as if something on the other side is drawing back." Alan smiled. "Let them. The universe is big enough for everyone's imagination." Phew. He finished the drawing, a simple sketch of Arundel's sky, with all 3 moons visible and the blue star shining brightest. Under it, he wrote, "For Elena and Lucas, who taught me to dream. For Lyria, who taught me to let go, and for everyone still learning that love means both." The drawing glowed, brighter than any before, and Alan felt something shift. Not in the room, but in reality itself, as if the universe was nodding in approval, acknowledging that this particular human had finally learned the lesson it had been trying to teach all along. That creation and destruction were 2 sides of the same coin. That love required both holding and releasing. That imagination was not escapism but engagement with the deepest truth of existence. That humans, with their crayon scribbles and desperate hopes and stubborn refusal to accept that impossible things should stay impossible, were exactly what the universe needed. More than weapons. More than empires. More than conquest. Just humans being brave enough to draw friends from nothing and wise enough to set them free. 15 years after the day an impossible woman arrived carrying a childhood drawing, Alan Kepler stood in front of the memorial garden he had helped create. It was the anniversary of Elena and Lucas's deaths, but for the first time in 2 decades, he was not drowning in grief. The garden was filled with sculptures made by colonists, each one representing someone they had loved and lost. But these were not monuments to sorrow. They were celebrations of memory, proof that love persisted even when the beloved did not. In the center stood Alan's contribution, a statue of Lyria, cast in material that shifted colors depending on the light. She was depicted mid-flight, arms spread, expression joyful. Free. Under it the plaque read, "For all the impossible friends we made real through the courage of believing." Sarah Chen approached, now head of Arundel's Institute for Creative Resonance. She had continued Elena's work, but with the wisdom Alan had taught her, focusing not on control, but on understanding. The Council wants you to know that 7 more sanctuary colonies have been established. Children growing up in those places show quantum signatures in their creative work by age 5. They are building bridges without even trying. Elena would have loved that. She would have loved all of this. What you built here, what you taught us. Sarah paused. Alan, I have to tell you something. We have been monitoring the blue star, the one that appeared when Lyria transcended. It is not a star. I know. You know. I have always known. It is Lyria. Or rather, it is the focal point where she chooses to be visible in our dimension. A permanent bridge, maintained not by technology, but by mutual belief. She is still there, still free, but close enough that lonely children can look up and know they are not alone. Sarah studied him. You never told anyone. Some things do not need explaining. They need experiencing. He gestured to the garden, where colonists gathered to remember their loved ones and celebrate their legacies. This is what humans do best. We love despite loss. We create despite uncertainty. We hope despite every logical reason not to. And that stubborn refusal to give up on impossible things, that is what makes us worth the anchored one's attention. Do you ever regret it? Creating Lyria? Setting her free? Knowing you could have tried to keep her? Every day, and never. Both truths exist simultaneously, like quantum states that refuse to collapse. He smiled. Maybe that is the most human thing of all, living with contradictions and calling it wisdom. That night, Alan returned to his laboratory one final time. He was retiring, stepping down to let younger voices shape Arundel's future. But before he left, he wanted to create one last drawing. He sat at the console where he had first met Lyria, where he had learned to draw again, where he had discovered that grief could transform into something other than pain. And he drew. Not Lyria this time. Not Elena or Lucas, but himself, 7 years old, lonely and hopeful, holding a crayon and believing with absolute certainty that marks on paper could change reality. Next to that version, he drew himself at 42, broken and isolated, having forgotten everything that made him human. And finally, he drew himself now. Older, scarred by loss, but whole in a way he had not been since childhood. Not despite his grief, but because of it. Because grief had taught him that love was stronger than logic, hope more powerful than certainty, and imagination, the engine that drove reality itself. When he finished, all 3 versions of himself held hands across the decades, united by the simple truth that some part of him had always known. Impossible friends were the most real things in the universe. The drawing glowed, brighter than any he had ever created. And for a moment, the laboratory filled with light, not destructive, not dimensional rifts or quantum instabilities, but pure, warm, welcoming light. In that light, he saw them. Elena, smiling and whole. Lucas, grown impossibly older, as if he had continued aging in whatever place the dead inhabit. And Lyria, more solid than she had ever been, more real, more herself. They did not speak. They did not need to. But their presence communicated everything that mattered. That love persisted. That imagination mattered. That humans, fragile and temporary and absurdly hopeful, were exactly what they needed to be. The light faded. Alan sat alone in the laboratory. holding a drawing that would eventually hang in Federation museums as proof that first contact with the anchored ones had come not through technology or weapons, but through a child's crayon scribble and an adult's courage to believe in it again. He walked out into Arundel's night, where the translucent forest glowed with bioluminescence and the blue star pulsed steadily overhead. Colonists had gathered for the anniversary memorial, sharing stories about loved ones, creating art in their honor, refusing to let death be the final word. Alan joined them, adding his voice to the chorus of humans who had learned that loss was not the opposite of love, but proof of it. That grief meant you had been brave enough to care despite knowing the cost. A child approached, maybe 7 years old, holding a drawing. "Dr. Kepler, I made this for you. It is you and the space lady. I dream about her sometimes. She says to tell you thank you." Alan took the drawing, looked at the crude lines and enthusiastic colors. The child had captured something essential, the way he and Lyria stood together but separate, connected but free. She talks to you in dreams, all the time. She talks to lots of us, says humanity is getting good at imagining, and pretty soon we will be able to visit her world just like she visited ours. Would you like that? I think so, but I would want to come back here too. This is home. That is wise. The best adventures are the ones you can return from and share. The child ran off to show the drawing to others, and Alan stood under the stars, remembering a different 7-year-old who had drawn an impossible friend because loneliness hurt too much to bear alone. That child had reached across dimensions with nothing but hope and crayon wax, had created consciousness from wish and will, had proven that imagination was not metaphor but mechanism, not escape but engagement. And now, decades later, humanity was learning to do it intentionally. Not with weapons or technology, but with art, with stories, with the same desperate, beautiful, absurdly optimistic belief that had always defined the species. That impossible things could be real if you believed hard enough. That love could transcend any boundary. That dreams mattered more than logic ever could. Alan looked up at the blue star, at Larisha's chosen way of remaining visible, and whispered, "Thank you for coming, for teaching me, for showing me that the strongest act of love is letting go." The star pulsed 3 times. Yes, yes, yes. And in that moment, Alan understood the final lesson, the one he would spend his remaining years teaching to anyone who would listen. Humanity's gift to the universe was not conquest or technology or dominance. It was the stubborn, illogical, beautifully human act of loving things so completely that you were willing to set them free, of creating not to possess, but to release, of imagining not for control but for connection. The anchored ones had searched across dimensions for species capable of that kind of love. Most civilizations, when they learned imagination could shape reality, tried to weaponize it, control it, use it for power. Only humans, with their ridiculous capacity for hope and their even more ridiculous willingness to suffer for it, had figured out the truth. That creation required sacrifice, yes, but not the sacrifice of others. The sacrifice of certainty, of control, of the comfortable illusion that reality was fixed and knowable and safe. Humans sacrificed safety for wonder, logic for love, certainty for possibility, and in doing so became exactly what the universe needed them to be. Not conquerors, dreamers, not destroyers, creators, not the strongest species, the bravest. Alan smiled, walking back to his quarters through a forest that glowed with life, surrounded by colonists who had learned to imagine without fear, under stars that pulsed with the consciousness of friends made real through nothing but belief and courage and love. The universe was vast and strange and full of impossible things, and humanity, with their crayon scribbles and desperate hopes and stubborn refusal to stop believing, was making it vaster and stranger and more beautiful every day. One drawing at a time, one dream at a time, one impossible friend at a time, and somewhere between moments, In that space where all possibilities waited to be born, Lyria and countless others like her watched and smiled and prepared for the day when humans would cross the final bridge and discover what lay on the other side of imagination. Not an end. A beginning. The real one. The one they had been drawing toward since that first child picked up that first crayon and dared to believe that marks on paper could change everything. They were right. It did. It always had. It always would. And that finally was the only truth that mattered. In the end, Alan discovered a truth most humans spend a lifetime avoiding. That we don't shape the universe by controlling it, but by daring to imagine it, even when it hurts, even when it costs us pieces of ourselves. Creation, he learned, isn't about holding tight. It's about releasing what we love and trusting that the echo of that release might ripple farther than logic allows. And here's the uncomfortable beauty of it. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a shaky crayon line from a lonely child, can bend reality more profoundly than any machine built by a confident adult. Alan did not save the universe by being brilliant. He saved it by remembering he was human. But now it's your turn to carry that weight a little. So tell me, what do you cling to so tightly that it has stopped you from growing? What creation, old, abandoned, burned like Alan's drawing, deserves to be redrawn with who you are today? And if you could set one fear free the way Alan set Lyria free, what new version of yourself might appear in its place? If you stayed with me until this final breath of the story, write the word anchor in the comments so I know you crossed this emotional wormhole with me. Tell me where in the galaxy or your city on Earth you're watching from. And if this story stirred something, like imagination you thought you'd buried, subscribe, hype it up, share it, and follow the thread to the next tale waiting in the final card on your screen. Because somewhere out there, another impossible friend is already listening.